Well, good evening, everyone. It is great to be with you this evening. I'm Hannah, and I'm one of the vicars here at St. George's. And today we are going to be talking about fasting. So we're coming into the season of Lent. This is the traditional seasons where Christians all around the world will be starting to enter a time of fasting and preparation as we remember Jesus' fast in the wilderness. And fasting is helping us prepare our hearts ready for Easter. As a church, we've also been journeying through the deeply formed life. We did a few Sunday preachers, small groups have been doing different things, and some of our young adults that are present here today have been going deeper in their discipleship through that course. And so this is part of that sort of rhythm, that way of expressing, going deeper with God and having discipline in our discipleship. Now, I don't start this talk being an expert. I have made lots of mistakes in fasting in the past, and later on we got two videos of two people who it's a really important part of their rule of life. But one of the things I remember about fasting is when I was at school, I went to a Catholic school, and we had CAFOD fasts. And I thought I'd sign up for one of these, and within an hour I had eaten quite a lot of my friend's food tech meal, and realised that I'd completely broken the fast very quickly. So this isn't a talk that says that I've got all the answers or there's any judgment, but it's me saying it's a journey I'm on too, and I really want to explore how I can go deeper in the understanding of fasting. Within this talk, we're going to look at what the Bible says about fasting, why we fast, and some different ways we could fast together. We'll be hearing, as I say, from two different people who regularly fast as their rule of life and some advice they have to share about their experiences. So let's look at some basic summaries of what fasting is. Fasting is going without food or something else for a period of time, and with the purpose of drawing closer to God. And fasting is found throughout the Old and the New Testament. Around 50 times it is mentioned. So I'm going to go through some different types of fasting, why you might do fasting, and sort of the impact it can have. So one of the ways is it could be an outlet of emotion. Fasting can be a significant way to grapple with different emotions like repentance, sorrow, or grief. I also think one of the key ways that fasting is helpful is it fosters humility. Fasting can be a way of expressing humility, recognizing that we are reliant on God and his provision. And a really good example of this is King David. And in Psalm 35, verse 13, he says these words, "But as for me, when they were sick, my clothing was sackcloth, and I afflicted my soul with fasting, and my prayer returned to my bosom. Yet when they were sick, my clothing was like sackcloth, and I humbled myself with fasting, and my prayer was genuine." I think David's showing us great humility in praying for those who are persecuting him. The sentences mirror each other nearly exactly, except for the addition in the second verse of humbling himself in fasting, making his prayer genuine. I feel there's so much to explore in these verses when we think about praying for those who maybe persecute us or we struggle with. As I say, when I've been exploring fasting, the thing that kept cropping up was this idea of humility, humbling the soul. And this week is the start of Lent, and we'll be celebrating Ash Wednesday together. This is a service that prepares us to step into the season of sacrifice and humility, to walk the path of a servant, just like Jesus did again and again in his earthly life. Whether this was in the wilderness, or as he loved the lost, the broken, or the outcasts, when he rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, or when he was betrayed by his friends and those he loved, when he was questioned and beaten and humiliated, and forced to carry his own cross to die a sinner's death. On Ash Wednesday, through beautiful liturgy, we're invited to carry out the Lenten discipline, the practices of fasting, prayers, and work of love. On this day, we receive the sign of the cross with ashes on our forehead. This is an ancient symbol of repentance, and reminds us of our mortality. Returning God's mercy and grace, marked with a cross of Christ, we make our way through Lent, longing for the baptism waters of Easter, our spiritual rebirth. As we're marked with the cross, these words are spoken over us. Remember, you are dust, and to dust you will return. Turn from sin and be faithful to Christ. If this isn't a service you've been to before, I encourage you to go and partake in its solemn beauty. Remembering we are created and dependent on God, we are invited to have lives of humility and holy dedication to the one who lifts us from the dust into new life. A life with purpose, with identity rooted in being the image bearer of God. We are invited to be loved and to love others. Another reason that we fast, it helps us to relate to those who are poor or in difficult situations. It's a way of standing with those who have less. And it often, for many of us, we have little understanding what it's like to be truly hungry or worried. Worried about where the money's going to come to pay for basic essentials. But there are those among us, this is a reality. Either in this church or in the communities we live in this country or across the world. In Isaiah 58, God challenges his people who have been fasting. It looks devout, but the practice does not match their hearts. God is looking for a people of justice whose spiritual lives flow into the way they live. There needs to be integrity in our decisions. We make decisions every day. We think about how we treat others and how we possess power. The decisions we make sometimes are to people right in front of us or people we know, but often they're to people who are faceless, who live in different countries and different places. The people who pick our coffee, the people who sew our clothes, those who bear the burden of climate change or lose their homes through deforestation to give us palm oil and soybeans. The words in Isaiah 58 are very clear. Is this not the kind of fasting I have chosen? To loose the chains of injustice, to untie the cords of the yoke and set the oppressed free, to break every yoke. Is it not to share food with the hungry and provide for the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, you clothe them, and not turn away from your own flesh and blood. Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. I think fasting has a lot to do with justice. It's at the core of it. It is a call for disciples who take up their cross to follow Christ. If Christianity's feeling easy, I'm sorry to tell you, you're doing it wrong. We should be seeking new ways to seek justice daily, and fasting gives us the opportunity to realign ourselves with God's heart, to live holy, healthy, and humble lives. In Pete Greig's vision that he had as he started 24/7 prayer, he says these words, "What's the vision? The vision is holiness that hurts the eyes. It makes children laugh and adults angry. It gave up the game of minimal integrity long ago to reach for the stars. It scorns the good and strains for the best. It is dangerously pure." Jesus warned us about being lukewarm disciples. And I think one of the biggest dangers facing us is practicing Christianity as a club we opt in and out of. When we choose never to prioritize it in terms of time, gifts, emotion, service, or prayer. Faith in Jesus should be like thirsting for water, something we can't live without, something that we are drawn to and seek out. Which brings us to our next point, seeking God. Fasting can be integral in a season where we're asking God when something feels uncertain and we want to discern the right way forward. I have a friend who, when they're in a season where they felt God was saying to do something new, that they chose to do a Daniel fast. And this is a fast where you just eat fruit and vegetables for a season. In this season, he really felt God opened his eyes to what he should do next. And he started a charity. And it was really shaped by that season where he really went very deep with God and fasted and prayed. So fasting can be preparation for a new season or when we're thinking of a new vocation. Prayer and reflection can be really powerful. I think fasting can also be really helpful to break a habit. It's said that sometimes 21 days is a good idea of how long it can take to break a habit. This dates back to thinking from the 1960s. But it's now recognised that can vary depending on how entrenched the habit or thing that you're doing is. But Lent being 40 days maybe is a good start if there's something you want to address in your life. One Lent, I decided that I would stop eating chocolate that wasn't fair trade. And at the time, there wasn't many fair trade options. There was no Tony's. If you haven't tried Tony's, please do. It is good. And so that pretty much meant no chocolate for Lent, which is not the biggest deal, but I do love chocolate. It's quite important to me. So I did this. I knew that there was a lot of slavery connected to chocolate, and I didn't want to partake in that. When I got to the end of Lent, I realised to go back to having chocolate I knew enslaved people didn't seem very good. And so that season of going without changed the way I engaged with chocolate and made me rethink how to go forward. So let's look at some biblical background. We've already heard the verses from Matthew where Jesus gives us really clear instructions of how to fast. He's talking about putting oil on your head and to wash your face. And this is because fasting practices at that time, you didn't do those things. They were seen as sort of luxuries or indulgences. But they also made it really obvious that you were fasting. And so Jesus is saying, this is a new way to fast. It's not something between everyone else that you make a big statement about, but it's something personal between you and God. Don't draw attention to yourself. And don't be aware of what other people are thinking. And this passage in Matthew is found in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount, which has a series of practical instructions Jesus is giving his followers. And there's a common pattern that wherever you are doing, whether it's praying or giving to the poor or fasting, that this should be done in private between you and God. And the reward will come to you through him. In the verses that follow, the instructions on fasting teach us about not valuing the things of this world, not treasuring up things here, but in heaven. And fasting is a clear tool that gives us a focus and to rebalance ourselves, realign ourselves with God and not the temptations of this world. Now, in my household, we really enjoy Sort Your Life Out with Stacey Solomon. I don't know if you are watching that. It's basically a team goes in and helps a family who have hoarded up lots and lots of things and it's become a problem. And what they do is they take everything out of the house and they put it in a massive warehouse. And then they try and sort out what they keep and what they don't. About half of their possessions they try and get rid of. So let's just have a little clip of this now.
Oakley's seen it first.
Oakley's seen it. Oakley's seen it.
It's like, what's in there?
Let's walk in.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Whoa.
Welcome to your house.
How did we get all this in the house?
It's a really good programme and it looks at some of the triggers that mean these families accumulate these possessions. Sometimes there are triggers like bereavement or the family growing or stresses or illnesses. The thing I find startling is the amount of things they own and how somewhere in our identity this need to keep possessing things, keep buying can pass reason and sense when we feel vulnerable. I remember when I worked for Lighthouse, which is one of our mission partners that works with people who are very vulnerable, some of them homeless. There was a gentleman who'd been storing a bag and a coat of his, and he came to collect them. And he was so overjoyed to see his possessions again. That was all he owned, particularly his coat. He was so excited about this coat. And at the time, I was moving house, and I was filling a lorry of my possessions. And to me, the contrast between how much he valued the small amount he had to the vast expanse I had. God knows what's good for our hearts and our lives. And we need to consider that not gaining more and more possessions, it's not good for us. We're not meant to eat more, do more, be more. God knows what these desires do to us. He wants the best for us. And as we fast, then it sort of gives us a new focus, a new way of thinking what we should be doing and how we should live. As we fast, we feast on God. And this is reflected in Matthew 4, verse 4. It's written, "Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." We are meant to be dependent on God, to be spiritually fed by him. This strengthens our faith and our physical resilience. And in Matthew 9, verses 14 to 17, Jesus is asked why his disciples are not fasting. And Jesus explains, because when you have a wedding, the bridegroom is there. At the same time, he was there with his disciples. He was living among them. And in the tradition at the time, you didn't fast or labor while the wedding feast was going on. And he was saying, it's the same. When I'm here, you don't need to fast. But when I'm gone, you do. You need to find ways to draw close to me. Those disciples were sitting at their rabbi's feet. They were there with him. They could experience him. We don't have that experience quite the same way. And so fasting gives us the opportunity to sit at the rabbi's feet again, to refocus on him. Okay, so I said we had two short videos. One is from Etienne. Etienne comes to our morning service. He also helps with our Farsi community. And fasting is something that he really values and has done for a long time. The second video is by a vicar from St. Matt's called James Barnett. And he, again, has a rule of life that fasting is really important to him. So I asked them why they fasted and how it helps them and any tips they have. James gave me 4 videos, so I'm going to use the first in this one, but I have made a resource that we're going to put on our website tomorrow that includes all his videos and some notes to help you think further on what he has to say. So we'll watch those videos now.
My name is Etienne. I'm a member of St. George's. I've been here for about 3 years, and I've been an active member with the Farsi group. It's such an amazing group. I think it's the most amazing group in the church. I've been fasting all my adult life. It's something my dad introduced into the family. So we set a day in a week just to wait, just to pray, just to seek the mind of God and do things differently. And I've carried on with that culture from the family, and I've seen a difference in my spiritual growth. Sometime in the past, I had some health challenge, and it was something that I needed to stay in the place where I could hear from God. And I think I got clarity. I got a word. One special word I heard was Psalm 91 and verse 16. With long life, I'll satisfy you and show you my salvation. And I could see God's hand in my life because he gave me a word in that season saying I was going to have satisfactory long life. And it made all the difference in everything I know. My first tip for anyone to start is keep it small, keep it simple, keep it short. Deal with the little things that would cause any level of distraction between you hearing from God and you speaking to God. And so it might just be as little as a social media stay away. It might just be as little as your device. Anything that keeps bothering you in the time of intimacy with God, I would say just put them aside and just have a good time with God.
Why do you fast? I again, off the top of my head, I came up with 5 reasons why I engage in fasting. Okay. The first reason is because I think Jesus assumed that his followers would. So when he teaches on fasting, he says, when you fast. So reason number 1, Jesus kind of assumed we would. Reason number 2, and I don't know if I can articulate this very well. Scott McKnight wrote a brilliant book on fasting. in which he talks about fasting as being like body talk. So it's a way of getting our physical bodies involved in our spiritual lives. And I find that really helpful. I find the physical stuff stimulates my desire for Jesus. So the second reason I fast is because it's a kind of way of using my body to communicate. If that doesn't sound me too weird, make me sound too weird. Third reason, it's about creating space. And this is really the main reason I would say, after Jesus telling me to. I fast to feast on God. I fast because it creates space for me to encounter or be awake to the God who is present with me all the time. So I have a little phrase, I fast in order to feast on God, that I remind myself of when I'm fasting, so that I can not just kind of spend the day hungry, but use that hunger as a stimulus to seek God. Fourth reason, to wake myself up. I drift. I don't know about you, but my spiritual life, I can sleepwalk my way through it. And so fasting isn't pleasant all the time. That kind of low-level hunger, or quite acute hunger, is useful because it stimulates a reminder to myself, that's the spiritual hunger I have for Jesus, even if I don't feel it. So it's a waking myself up thing. And then closely related to this, I guess, is it, I find that fasting draws me closer to some of the areas that Jesus is concerned with. When I fast, I'm reminded of those who go without. I don't often go without, if I'm honest, but by fasting, I'm awoken to that reality. So it kind of helps me draw closer to some of the things that matter to Jesus, my King. So there you go, 5 reasons. Jesus assumed, body talk, feasting on God, waking myself up, and drawing myself closer to his agenda.
There we go, wise words. If you're part of a small group, as I say, there's a resource that uses more of James's insights into fasting. Now, in one of the later videos, James talks about some different tips. We got a tip from Etienne, but the tips he gives is fast what's right for you. So for some of us, that will be going without food. And if you haven't done that before and you're able to, I'm gonna try really hard this Lent to try and fast at least one meal, or some different ways of doing it. So it's okay to try that anew. But if there's reasons you can't, that's okay as well. There might be lots of reasons why fasting food is not okay. And so there's other ways you can do that. And Etienne said, didn't he, anything that gives you distractions. I've sort of talked about some things that may be to do with justice, or lots of reasons. I've got some more in a moment. Start small, so don't just try and fast the whole of Lent, like maybe try something that's realistic and manageable, and then use that time to spend time with God. So don't just miss a meal by accident and go, I fasted. Actually intentionally put it in there and say, I'm going to pray through that time, or I'm going to use that time really well. The next tip he gives is to do it with others. It's hard. That's why we're joined as a massive family, is so that we can support each other, encourage each other, and keep accountable to each other. And so even if you're not in the same physical place, you could text someone and say, I'm fasting now, or I fasted, say, how'd it go? Keep each other, encourage each other. And then the last thing he said is to embrace the hard. It's not meant to be easy. It's meant to be difficult, so that we can engage with those different emotions and make that space. So this Lent, why don't you try fasting? Maybe there's a particular thing you want to see breakthrough in. The church deficit is something we really want to pray into and work out and really go to God with. Or we're planning a church plant next year, and this seems a season where some of that uncertainty of what that's going to look like is being worked out. People are making decisions and prayerfully deciding. But maybe your prayers will matter in that process. Maybe there's a global situation that you're really worried about, and your normal prayers don't feel enough. Fasting might be a way to stand with those situations and really give them over to God. Maybe you've got a family struggle or a friend you'd really love to see come to Christ. And as I say, it might be that there's an injustice or a distraction or something harmful you want to step away from, and it can be a really good way to do that. Maybe it would be not buying any new clothes throughout Lent, or maybe coming off social media, or fasting Netflix or any other sort of streaming platform where you find yourself binging for ages and not actually spending any time with God. Or maybe it's doing something like walking instead of going in the car, something really practical, and then using that walk to have space and time with God. But whatever your fasting looks like, let's do it together as a church family, holding each other in encouragement and accountability. Let's be expectant to what God is going to do in and through us, the difference it's going to make in the world. Let's honour the call to be disciples sold out for Him.